Hey guys, Half Click Up here. In today's video, we will be swapping rear brake pads on our 2014 Triumph Tiger 800. Let's go. Okay, tools and parts for this job. Flathead screwdriver, socket wrench, Torx 30, 14 millimeter, 12 millimeter, 8 millimeter, synthetic caliper grease, a torque wrench, brake parts cleaner, and of course some new rear pads. I always go with EBC HH centered, part number for the Tiger 800 FA140HH. Okay, a quick tool application guide. The T30 Torx is for your ABS wheel sensor bracket. The 12 millimeter and 14 millimeter sockets are for your caliper bolts. The flathead screwdriver is for your brake pad retainer pin. And then last but not least, the 8 millimeter socket is for your brake line bracket here. This is optional to remove. However, I like to remove it so that it's easier to manipulate the caliper once we get it in our hands. Okay, now taking our flathead on our pad retainer pin, I failed to mention that this piece here that we're unscrewing is simply a cover. And it's a cover for a 5 millimeter bolt that is actually the pin inside there. So 5 millimeter hex head. Now moving on to our 14 millimeter caliper bolt. It's on there with 20 foot-pounds, so I'm going to use a breaker bar. Just makes it easier. There's that. And moving on to our 12 millimeter caliper bolt. Breaker bar again. Now these caliper bolts have grease on them. We're going to clean that off and apply fresh caliper grease before reassembly. And same thing with our 14 millimeter bolt. Again, this caliper bolt is also greased. We'll clean it off, apply fresh grease before reassembly. Right, and so that's all there is to that. Whole caliper is now free to be removed. Remember, we removed the 8 millimeter brake line keeper up here, and so with that bracket loosened, we can manipulate this quite a bit easier. And so looking at our pad life, they're not absolutely toast, but they're close enough for my own comfort, so we're going to change them out. Finish removing this pin. This pad pin will also receive grease. We'll clean that off with brake parts cleaner as well. And here are your pads. Comparing the old pads to new, you can see the difference. Now we're going to spray down this caliper with brake cleaner. We'll clean our piston before we compress it into the caliper. And there. It's not as good as new, but impressively close. Now you can compress this piston by hand. I always find it to be stupidly difficult, really. So I like to use a paper towel to protect the surface of the caliper. And utilize a C-clamp. There. That method's always worked quite well for me. Alright, now we just place our pads in there. Kind of just hold them in place around the hole. I grease this pin off camera. Don't forget to do that. Through one pad, through two pads, Send your pin home with your 5mm. And kind of just keep these pads spread open with your fingers like this. Place it back over the brake rotor. Line your bolt holes up, and she is in place. Now you can see my pads are properly oriented. However, if your pads are hanging down and just kind of wanting to swing like a pendulum, then they're not seated. What you can do is come underneath here, and you see how the bottom of the pads, that's that fresh new gold finish. See how they're sitting on that little ledge? That's how you know they're seated properly in you know, the final seated position. That's what it should look like. And so now she's ready to send the bolts home and torque them down. Again, off camera, I cleaned and re-greased both caliper bolts. Just hand tight for now. Alright, and so your 14mm bolt is torqued to 27 Newton meters. For us Americans, that's 19.9 foot-pounds. And the 12mm bolt is torqued to 22 Newton meters, or for us Americans, 16.2 foot-pounds. Retaining pin has a torque spec. I don't know what it is. I call it hand tight. Replace your protective cap. Now slide your ABS sensor back in there. With your T30. And don't forget about your little retainer bracket for your brake line, 8mm. And we'll install this one good and tight as well. There we go. And your final step is you want to depress your rear brake until the pads compress onto the rotor. Just takes one or two presses and the pads seal up to the rotor. This rear pad swap is complete. And here's the final product, ready for another 15 or 20,000 miles before we swap more fresh pads into her. That's it. Again guys, rather simple and straightforward process for swapping the rear pads on these Tiger 800s. If you have any questions or comments, drop them down below. But as always, this has been me and that's been you. Sap click up. Catch you guys on the next one. Peace. Goodbye.